inches. But as far as the other temperate zones, we do. Now, when we get up into the high country, we get up into Flagstaff area, we're going to be observing the forest up in the mountain deserts. And I didn't give you the elevation. The mountain deserts are around 5,500 feet, all the way up to about 8,200 feet above sea level. And 8,200 feet, that, in fact, 8,213 feet above sea level is the highest you're going to be driving in this van today. 8,213 feet above sea level. Now, 8,213 is not the highest point in the state of Arizona. The highest summit, you will see this when we get up into Flagstaff. That's going to be on top of a very large stratovolcano outside of town called Mount Humphreys. And Mount Humphreys, well, we can't see it right now, but normally is a snow-peaked mountain, snow-covered, because the summit of Mount Humphreys, well over 12,000, that's in what we call the Arctic tundra. That's what is known as the highest temperate zone on the planet. A lot of people get confused and say, Arctic tundra in Arizona? Yes, absolutely. Get up into Flagstaff. Well, I'll introduce Flagstaff before we get there, but Flagstaff is one of the snowiest cities in the U.S. And yeah, I didn't know that when I first came to Arizona. I retired Coast Guard out of Southern California in many years ago. But when I got into Arizona around 2002, I landed up in Flagstaff, and it was around this time of the year, and I thought, oh, I like Arizona. This is great. Yeah, my first semester of grad school around mid-October, walking to school in board shorts and flip-flops, we got 11 inches that day. Boom. I was like, Mom? Anyway. But when we think about temperate zones all around the world are pretty much supported by the amounts of rainfall that they get because of plants. And within Arizona, you have different plant areas where different types of plants and trees grow. Like Phoenix, desert plains, there's few trees down there. A lot of brushes and scrub, cactus. But then you high desert plains where, Sedonias, you have more brush and cactus and some larger tree species. But when we get up into high country, when we get up into Flagstaff area, we're starting to observe several of the other tree species that we have in Arizona, but mostly the ponderosa pine tree. And ponderosa are a very large member of the pine tree family. We're passing some ponderosa right now, but I'll point to them when we get up closer to where there's going to be just nothing but ponderosa. But anyway, the animals, when we think about rainfall support different types of plants, and different type and amounts of plants support different type and amounts of animal species. So within the high country of Arizona, we have several larger big game animals, big game predator and prey animals that don't exist in other parts of the state. Now, the apex predator for Arizona is the North American mountain lion. We are not going to see mountain lion today at all. Trust me in that. I wish we could, but guys, I've been out in Arizona over 25 years. I've not one time seen a mountain lion in the wilderness wild, not once. But yeah, I'm told that just because I haven't seen them, they haven't, doesn't mean they haven't seen me. But anyway, we're not going to see any black bear today either. Black bear are nocturnal and very elusive, pretty much like the mountain lion is. Now, as far as dangerous critters and things like that, rest assured, none of that is going to be on the menu for us today either. No snakes, no spiders, no scorpions. Promise. And why? Well, snakes are pretty much out where we are going to be going. They're out right now, but by the time we get there, there's going to be so many people, community, traffic. Snakes aren't going to be anywhere near where we are going to be. Okay, that's a promise. Now, snakes down in Sedona, if you happen to be walking around on the trail, just, okay, yeah, they're out there. But pretty much this time of the year from around 9:30, 10 o'clock, we're not even there yet, up to about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the hottest time of the day, and that's when the snakes are out. Okay, I'll quit talking about snakes. No spiders and scorpions. Well, what kind of snake? Mostly rattlesnake, yeah, which, within what's that? They do pretty, exactly. When they're barking at you, yeah, they can't strike, they can't hunt. That's simple and audible warning, and you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Yep. In North America, there are 12 different type of rattlesnake, and all different species of rattlesnake are a diamondback in the pattern of their scales. Now, all rattlesnakes are diamondback, okay. But what makes the difference in the different species of rattlesnake are the different coloring of that diamondback and the different toxicities within their venom. And when we think about 12 different species of rattlesnake in North America, Arizona doesn't have that many. In fact, we don't have 12 species of rattlesnake in Arizona. We only have 11. Okay, yeah. The only rattlesnake that isn't in Arizona, you guys have it, both of you, the eastern diamondback. Yeah, we don't have the eastern diamondback. Right. Oh yeah, these guys got one killed between their house or something like that. You said, Jesse? Yeah. I just, well, never mind. We'll talk about snakes more later. But no spiders and scorpions today either. You know why? We're not looking for them. Okay. All right. Now we'll talk more animals here in a little bit, guys. We're just letting you know where we are. We're climbing up on top of the Colorado Plateau. We're going to be on the Colorado Plateau here in just a few more minutes. These hairpin switchback turns are what we call the Mogollon Rim. In fact, this Mogollon Rim is the big wall of elevation delineation between Sedona and Flagstaff. We have the Mogollon Rim, which we're climbing up right now. And Mogollon Rim is the south leading edge of the Colorado Plateau, the largest plateau mesa area in North America, which pretty much boundaries all of northern Arizona, northwest New Mexico, all of Colorado, all of Utah, southern Montana, and part of Wyoming. The north leading edge of the Colorado Plateau is actually up in Wyoming. It's what we call Yellowstone National Park. So from Yellowstone National Park south to the Mogollon Rim, everything in between is the Colorado Plateau, which is going to relate later on to the geology portion, and we'll talk more about the Colorado Plateau as a unique area of land here in the U.S. But the name Mogollon, actually, we give this Mogollon Rim the name because of long time ago when this was Mexico, the northern boundary of the country of Mexico was pretty much where Sedona is, roughly, because Commandant General Mogollon was able to move a lot of pack animals and troops people on top of this Colorado Plateau long before we called it that, but that basically extended the northern boundary of the country of Mexico. So that's why we call this the Mogollon Rim. Now right now, go ahead. How are you guys feeling temperature-wise in the back? You doing okay, Jess? Everybody? Okay.
We're doing good.
Now, coming into South Flagstaff, we have about 20 more miles before we get to Flag, but periodically, occasionally, in between the breaks of the trees out the front window, you can see the summit of Mount Humphreys, and that is that very large strata volcano right outside of Flagstaff, which we're going to talk about volcanic activity and the most recent volcanic eruptions out here. But basically, as we climbed up the switchback turns up on this part of the Colorado Plateau, we've entered on top of what's called an archipelago mountain range. There's two types of mountain ranges on the planet. One type of mountain range is called tectonic, like the Appalachians, the Rockies here in the U.S. Those are tectonic mountain ranges. Archipelago mountain range are, all over the world. Most people assume and think that archipelago mountains are islands in the water, which is true, but archipelago are also on the land. And we'll talk about this archipelago mountain range here in just a little bit when we get closer into Flagstaff and on our way to Williams here later. But as we get up into the high country, on either side of the road in prominence are these ponderosa pine trees. These are the tree I mentioned earlier. Ponderosa is a unique member of the pine family, the conifer tree, or the fir trees. When you see the base of the tree, the ponderosa has turned red in color. That indicates that that tree is at least 500 to 600 years old, and the tree has also become a member of the hardwood category of trees, just like oak, poplar, spruce. And around the 1857 time period, the military up here at Fort Tuthill, they discovered the usefulness of the ponderosa as a building resource. the which basically motivated the railroad to come to town. So we built the railroad track out of the town of St. Louis, headed to the southwest across the New Mexico territory into the Arizona territory to come up here to Fort Tuthill, which was by then a little community. Now, once the railroad got to Fort Tuthill, it stopped at Tuthill and remained the end of the line for that travel route for many years. When the railroad got out here, they were the first to commence harvesting of these ponderosa pine trees. As the trees were timbered, milled, and the lumber was sent back east on that train to help in the rebuilding of what we call the post-Civil War Reconstruction era that led many, many years into what we consider the Industrial Revolution construction era. So the Arizona Territory timbers that led many years into the state of Arizona timbers, we were providing a lot of lumber for the rest of the U.S. to the east only. Why? Well, the train came to Fort Tuthill and stopped. It did not go west of Flagstaff for many, many years. And Flagstaff didn't become a community until 1880 sometime. Now, back in the late 1860s, early 1870s, Fort Tuthill was becoming a prominent little, worker community because contracted workers had arrived out here to work for the railroad. One of the contracted workers was called lumberjack. And lumberjack were just working for the railroad but cutting trees down all day long. That's all the lumberjacks did. And then the other contracted workers for the railroad were the miners. The mineral industry and the mineral interests up at the Colorado River Gorge provided back then copper and silver, which motivated a lot of people to come out here. Now, the mining at the Colorado River Gorge, yeah, that is the same location we are headed to today, but this was a long, long time before it was considered the Grand Canyon National Park. So you consider the workforces up here. You have the railroad, the lumber industry, and the mining industry up here. A couple thousand people living up here at Fort Tuthill, and those people are getting fed by the produce grown down at Schnebly Station. Now, times continue, and eventually, by the time one of the train trips made it out here, we're talking about the late 1860s, when that train got out here, gives us a really, really good photographic history of Old Fort Tuthill as it was becoming Flagstaff. And back then, the photographic technology, and in those sepia-toned images, you can see the old labor and workforces up here, and the majority of the people working up here were veterans. Veterans from the Civil War. The war had been over for several years now, but in the old pictures, you can see these old guys, long gray beards, older men now, but still wearing gray pants, blue pants, gray pants, blue pants, right on down the line. So it didn't matter if you had fought in the Northern Army or fought in the Southern Army. Coming out to the Arizona Territory, the Fort Tuthill time period, this was the place to be. People were making money hand over fist. Now, we get up into the mid-1870s, and of course now 1876 came around. And 1876 was our centennial celebration year, 100 years of America. There were 4th of July parades on both coastlines in big cities: New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington. West Coast 4th of July parades: Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego. The only 4th of July celebration parade in 1876 in the Arizona Territory was up here at Fort Tuthill. The only parade, because of the veterans. And the vets by then, 1876, older boys now, but extremely patriotically proud to be where they currently were, compared to many years earlier as younger men fighting in the war. So in 1876, the vets, they directed the cutting down of 2 of the tallest ponderosa pine they could find. They chopped all the branches off of each tree. They lashed the 2 stumps together and made the very first tall flagstaff. And that flagstaff was planted right downtown near where the original train depot is still located. And for several years, the flagstaff served as a visual reference point, a landmark for the recruitment drives. The work recruiters up and down the East Coast would get people to the town of St. Louis. Once they got to St. Louis, the work recruiters would put them on the train and say, stay on this train till you get to the end of the line, which was Fort Tuthill. When you get off of that train, look around for the big tall flagstaff, walk over to the union office at the bottom, go sign in, and you're guaranteed a job. And that's pretty much how it happened. And now we're up to the year of 1882, and that is when Fort Tuthill was officially recognized as Flagstaff. went through several nicknames: the Flagstaff City, New San Francisco, like New York, New Jersey. Yeah, Fort Tuthill was a quite the profitable little boom town. Silverado was what they were going to call it. If you remember the stories, okay. Now, 1876, 1882, Flagstaff became a city, and it was only 4 years later, in 1886, that is when U.S. Congress passed the Homestead Act. And the Homestead Act was a motivational incentive to get people to settle the West, here in the U.S. And in the Arizona Territory, we weren't a state, but we were still within the sovereign boundaries of the U.S. The Arizona Territory, when the Homestead Act, allocated up to 5 acres of land per person in your family. In order to fully receive entitlement to the property, you had to live on the land and after 12 months show some kind of progress. In early days, Flagstaff, progress was mainly measured in agricultural yields, which eventually led into livestock production as far as getting land. And what that means basically, because of 1886, that's when the ranching community arrived in the Arizona Territory. And the ranchers were up here in the high country in the beginning briefly, but then it was discovered that longer grazing seasons were yielded down in lower elevations of the territory, down that little town just south of us called Schnebly Station. So the ranchers literally made their way down through the Oak Creek Canyon, what we just drove up through. Once ranching got down into Schnebly Station, it literally ate up agriculture overnight. And by the time 1902 came around, when Schnebly petitioned for the town to be recognized, Sedona was recognized as a ranching community, no longer agriculture. Because, well, what happened was the ranching stayed up here briefly, like I said, and went down south, but what did stick around up here is still prominent. In fact, Flagstaff, Arizona is one of the top horse production cities of North America. Horses. We are breeding many horses up here in Flagstaff. And it started back in the day with what is considered the most durable horse in the world, but is also known to be the fastest running horse alive, up to a quarter of a mile in distance. So the American quarter horse was first put together right here in Flagstaff a long time ago. Yeah, the quarter horse is the fastest running horse, but then the two next horses for distance and duration are the Spanish Barb and the Arabian. And both those two horses have bloodline that make the quarter horse. But the quarter horse will beat them both by more than 2 lengths of its body up to a quarter of a mile. But then after that, it stops. It's done for the day. And you can, it pretty much, yeah. But it can do several short distance, very fast spurts of speed throughout the day. Yeah. What's that? Ah, there it is. Done for the day, then stops. Now, guys, how we feeling back there? You doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing
okay.
good.
Now, we're coming into Flagstaff, and if we choose to make a stop, we're going to head about 30 minutes west to Williams, Arizona. Now, once we get to Williams, Arizona, we're going to go right to the train depot, and it's kind of a neat, worthwhile little look around. There is a snack bar there, the coffee shop, of course, bathrooms, and I'll explain more about what's going to happen for the train. But right now in Flagstaff, do we need to stop for bathroom or any kind of chips, snacks, drinks that you guys might want? We're okay? Okay. And train people, there are food things available at the train depot, on the train, and also as soon as you get off the train, there's things available in the area where you're going to be disembarking at the train depot. And Jesse, I'll explain exactly what's going to happen for you guys before we get there. Welcome to Flagstaff, folks. The third largest city in the state by population. You got Phoenix, Tucson, Flagstaff in that order. Flag is much older than Phoenix, but not as old as Tucson. Flagstaff and Prescott, Arizona, around the same ages of community. Flag is the highest in elevation city and has a local full-time population, we're told, about 180,000. But Flag is also home to Northern Arizona University, the second largest secondary school in the state. Second only to University of Arizona down in Tucson. And then right behind us is Arizona State down in Phoenix. But when NAU is in session, that brings another 150,000 plus people to this community. So, full medical school, full nursing school, many different engineering programs, earth science programs. They have all three: earth sciences, geology, seismology, and volcanology here. Volcanology are engineers that study volcanoes. I myself went through the anthropology program here in school years ago. Flagstaff is a interesting little historical town. I've kind of mentioned some of it, but it is a true definition of a fusion city. Fusion, because you got the history, but with modern technical and science understandings. A lot of studies going on here. Just near where we're going to be leaving out of town, we're going to be passing what's called Mars Hill. And up on top of Mars Hill happens to be what's called the Lowell Observatory, named for a man named Percival Lowell. Percy Lowell was a mathematician, astronomer that actually is given credit for the discovery of the planet Pluto. So we discovered Pluto right here in Flagstaff. But if you get to the Lowell Observatory, yeah, understand, if you noticed, I did not use the word former planet Pluto. Yeah, You get to Lowell, do not use the word former. They will politely ask you to leave. I'm kidding, guys, they won't. They'll try to sell you a hat or a t-shirt. It says, Flagstaff still loves you, Pluto. And on the back it says, you're always a planet to us, XOXO Flagstaff. It's kind of cute. We're kind of coming into South Flagstaff now. The historic district's over to our right. We're going to get onto Route 66 here in a second. Going to put us on I-40, and that'll shoot us straight to Williams. But when we come back this afternoon, see what's going to happen. We're going west. We're going to the train depot. Then everybody, passengers with the van, passengers on the train, we're all heading to the Grand Canyon from the south entrance. Then we, in this van, all of us, are going to see the national park from many different visual perspectives on the south rim today. And then after we leave the park, we're going to go to the Navajo Reservation. After we leave the Navajo Reservation, we're going to come back down to Flagstaff, but from the northeast. See, we're leaving out this way. We're going to see the Grand Canyon and come back into town this way. We're basically doing what is almost a 190-mile loop today around these volcanoes. Now, when we come back into Flag later this afternoon from the northeast direction, we'll see a lot more of the volcanoes, a lot more sides and parts of the very large community of Flagstaff. We're just on the southeastern side. We're getting out of town right now, so yeah, hope you guys didn't miss Flagstaff. Yeah, the name, right, the San Francisco Peaks are these mountain ranges, and there are several volcanoes in this mountain range. And when we talk about Archipelago Mountain Range, there are three different type of volcanoes all over the world, and we have all three different types. You can't really see in the back. That is Mount Humphreys. We pointed to it earlier. Mount Humphreys is a stratovolcano, and there's only one in Arizona, and that's it. Other volcanoes, like this one over here to my right with the communication towers on top, that is called a shield volcano. So a stratovolcano like this, a shield volcano is like this. And then the smallest, the youngest, most numerous volcano is called a cinder cone volcano. So you got the big one, the middle sized, and then the young one, just like this. And we'll show you the cinder cone volcanoes when we get further in and around this congested area. And we'll also, on the way back tonight, this afternoon, we'll talk and show about the youngest volcano out here. The most recent volcanic activity was over 1,000 years ago. So anyway, not worried about it right now. Yeah. Well, that's what they say, supposedly. Anyhow. Exactly, you put it up. Exactly. Mount St. Helens was an extinct volcano till 1980. Now it's not. It's dormant once again, but anyway, it is growing. Is that right? I've heard the Yellowstone caldera, which is going to take out the western half of the U.S., so I don't know. I don't know. Let's let's not talk about crazy stuff right now. So Flagstaff, but even when it was Fort Tuttle became Flagstaff, Flagstaff was a very popular destination. Like I said, when the railroad got out here, when we built that railroad track from St. Louis to Fort Tuthill, those trains back then, those were steam-driven locomotives, which they did not go very far. In fact, what you don't really talk about and see in the cowboy movies, those steam-driven trains could only run about 60 to 80 miles a day, and that's it. Only during the day, because limited electricity on board, those trains didn't run at night. Now, when the train got out here, they made money when the railroad got out here, they made money by being the railroad. Then they made money by exporting timber. Then they made money by exporting timber and minerals. Then the railroad started to make a lot more money from a very viable source of revenue, a new source, but happened to be the most precious cargo they had transported, what was the most profitable cargo, and that's people. People in the interests of early tourism because of the camera. Once again, the camera, once it came out to Flagstaff, the camera made its way up to the made its way to the Colorado River Gorge. And by that time, the camera had not only informed the rest of the United States, but the rest of the world was gaining knowledge on the Colorado River Gorge. So in the late 1800s, tourism was flocking into northern Arizona territory, long before we were a state. Now, by then, the Santa Fe rail line, when we were building the train, we had to build along the route from St. Louis to Fort Tuthill. We had to incorporate and build train stops, because the train could only make it around 60 to 80 miles. They'd pull into a train depot stop, turn the engine off, refuel overnight with coal or wood, and sometimes both, and of course top off their water tanks with water as they were steam driven. Then the next morning at sunrise, those steams were fired up and they were steaming hard to get to the next train depot stop before sunset. You've probably seen in the movies and all that history. Okay, now those train stops actually became very, very important, and are major municipalities that we'll talk about here in a second, because we get to the time period where the Santa Fe rail line started to recognize a need to take care of tourism. The early days of tourism was brutal, arduous, not comfortable, not convenient. Then the Santa Fe rail line commissioned a man by the name of Fred Harvey, who was the predecessor to Howard Johnson's. Harvey coined the idea of the hotel franchise here in America. There were Harvey hotels in New York, Washington, and Philadelphia when the Santa Fe rail line gave the contract to the Harvey Corporation to build hotels and restaurants at the train depot stops from St. Louis all the way out to Fort Tuthill, Flagstaff. And that's when it took off, because Harvey, as a hotel guy, he brought something to early tourism that had never ever been there before and is still very well prominent today, and that is hospitality. As a hotel guy, he knew how to take care of people, so he introduced catered hospitality into tourism, which took off. Harvey and the corporation with the Santa Fe rail line, they went over to Europe, did a lot of studies and trains and travel passengers, and Harvey himself brought back to the U.S. the dining car and the sleeping car integrated onto the Santa Fe train line, and eventually Santa Fe train line came up with, and the Harvey Corporation, the observation deck car, which, speaking of which, you guys in the back are in the club car, aren't you? Yeah, exactly. So that is an American invention that went around the world. There's observation cars and trains all over. That started here. Now, by the time the tourism came into play and tourism was up full and running, and the trains were for a long time bringing people out here, that years and years later, long after the state of Arizona, by 1912, the automobile came into play in understanding and also catering to tourism. Passengers are now driving their own privately owned vehicles along one of the first major highway conveyances here in the U.S. today, called historic Route 66. And Route 66, rural Route 66 went from Chicago south to St. Louis, And from St. Louis westbound to Los Angeles, Route 66 and the Santa Fe train line were parallel. And Route 66 also goes through those train depot towns that are now, like I said, municipalities along the same route that we're on right now. Because I-40 is one of the longer interstates in the U.S. It goes from Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way up to Los Angeles. But from St. Louis westbound to Los Angeles, I-40 and Route 66 are the same line of conveyance. So I hope you guys are getting your kicks right now, right? Except where you get to trains